Welcome. Carl Quorum, Coyle and Tanner. Glenn Jackman and I are here to wrap up this series we've been doing for Lunch and Learn. This is kind of what it's all about, where we bring it all together. All the things we've talked about over the last several weeks with what asset management can do, how you gather the information. This is where the payoff comes in. So what we're going to talk about today is the normal budgeting process. What normally goes on, public outreach. We're going to talk about the forecasting, talking about future investments, because what our asset management is really about is looking at long-term investment, not just next year's budget, but bringing in things like we've talked about, life cycle cost and risk and all of those things. This is all part of what makes more information worth having. And then a few different funding strategies and how those different funding strategies tie to the various things that we see through asset management, the failure types. So typically, if you go to most town websites, organization websites, you would find a capital improvement program that looks something like this, where there are a lot of big money spread out over many, many years. And the public is asked to walk into a voting booth and approve whatever you're asking for, and a lot of times this is the information they have. Sometimes if they go to some of the hearings, they might see a little more detailed information. We've kind of pulled out a real example where they have a particular project. They have a little more justification on why they're asking for it. They might have a little more detail on the budget that they're asking for and what backs it up. But at a typical hearing where you would talk about this kind of detail, you might have 15 people if you're lucky. Half of them are affiliated with the town. So then you have your crowd sitting there at a public meeting. The Public Works Director is there to talk about a few specific items. But some of the folks in the crowd are there to support the schools. Some of the folks are there to support the fire department. There's a limited amount of money to work with. So everybody has seen the little table in the handout that they got when they walked in the door. And they're trying to figure out what do they want to pay for. What's the most important thing? What do they want to support? So, you know, when you're working to compete for funding for your projects that you know are critical, what are the things that you need to consider? What are the things that you need to get ready for? What would it be that the public wants to know? You're asking for millions of dollars. What do the voters want to know? What does that investment mean to the community, to the overall health? I mean, we've talked about over the last few weeks, we've talked about things like public safety a lot. We've talked about risk a lot. These aren't just dollars being spent on a new bridge or a new road or a new sewer system. These are dollars being spent on the very community's very way of life. It's all about their standard of living. And the more you can back that up by answering these questions, what do we need to maintain the level of service the community expects? Have we looked at all of the alternatives? Are we maintaining what we have? Have the investments made in the past, are they being well cared for? Is the money being well spent? And are we constantly improving the operating skills and the maintenance skills of our workforce? The more you can demonstrate that, the more at ease the decision makers are at trusting you with more investment. So what we've kind of put together this morning is a little more detail how you use the asset management tools that we've been looking at to present more informed decisions. So we're looking at long-term budget forecasting, life cycle costs. It's not just how much it costs to buy it tomorrow, it's how much does it cost over the years to maintain it. We're looking at criticality. So we talk a lot about that, how it plays into risk. So how do we incorporate those things into the analysis of the budget. You have your short-term budget forecasts, where you do have to be cognizant of the town's budget process. I remember when we did our first infrastructure plan in Goffstown, we quadrupled our budget in 1 year. It was a major deal. It was like a 25% increase in the bottom line of the town budget. It cost the taxpayers a lot of money. They wanted to be very informed about what they were spending on. So you have to be cognizant of short-term impacts, and then again back to that cost benefit, analyzing those priorities and how does it meet the vision for what the town has set. Towns do master planning. They have a lot of long-term plans that different aspects of the community are involved in. So how is what you're putting together for them, how does it fit into that? So at this point, I'll turn it over to John. He can walk through some specific examples that come out of asset management.
Thanks, Carl. What we're looking at is, Carl was just talking about multi-year budgets, forecasting, utilizing the software to project anything from 10 years to 100 years out into the future. And the software has that capability, utilizing probability numbers based on recommended repairs. Here, as it gets closer during short term, you need to know more about your assets to make proper recommendations, whether it's repair, replace, or rehabilitate. And what you do is you set up costs in your asset management software. Here is different types of jobs based on different types of failures. So we have different failures, that are in the sewer pipeline, and it could be that there's no rehabilitation, just manhole, cured and placed point repair. So they're doing the whole section, test and seal. So what type of failure would be a point repair? That would be just a very local failure in your sewer pipe. Test and seal means that the pipe is structurally in good shape, but the failure is infiltration. So you have a different failure rate. If you're test and sealing and doing cured and placed point repair, has both failure rates. And then an exterior point repair means that it cannot be done with the same technology. So when you're doing your analysis, you look at what kind of failures you have in your assets. And then you look and match up the type of repair and its cost to that type of failure. And that's what this analysis is. And when initially this would be done on the capital improvement for replacement sewer line, now they did a cost benefit ratio and found by doing the rehabilitation and focusing on exactly what was failing, gave them the best life cycle cost, and now can project that the system's good for another 30 years. So if they replace the pipe, it would be another 80 years. So they look at that cost compared to the cost that they actually need. So that's your life cycle cost benefit ratio.
I will stop the video.
Is that what this?
Yeah. This is the opening.
I didn't notice that video. That threw me off here.
In this example, I'm going to demonstrate how to find high-risk assets due to capacity issues, and then create a project to replace those assets, those pipes, with larger diameter pipes. So I start by going into my risk module, my report. And
You
here
just have to
I'm
watch the video. I mean, the audio, it'll be a little bit.
What he's doing is he's going through, and these are all the different failure rates, different types of failure.
So when
and
I
then
select sanitary
the overall
pipes
probability of
on
failure,
that,
and then he looks at the high risk.
I can see that I have 450.
So he has 450 assets that are in high risk categories.
My highest risk pipe.
So he's going to,
Now, I can go ahead then and select that
But
450 value.
he wants to sort
And you will
by
add
different
those
failure
pipes
modes because he's
my
going to make a
selection
recommendation
set,
of what he's going to do for
on my
the
map. But what I'm interested in
collection. So he's
is
taken that
450
collection.
high-risk pipes. Which ones have a high risk capacity? And I do that by going into
Then he's going to utilize the filter to select out of that 490 which ones have failed due to capacity issues.
and select the
So-
values where I'm interested in capacity.
So he picked capacity, now he's sorting out which ones have failed.
Background that
And he's going to
capacity
put in
ratios in my surcharge pipes.
what limits he wants for his failure.
I want to apply that against my selected assets, and when I
He's
do
going to
that,
replace the existing
my filter
assets that were collected that were
turns
high risk
6
assets with
Now, what
only
those
the
6
assets
in my
that
selection
were
set.
high risk
First
to
clear my
capacity
450
failure.
pipes. And sometimes that might take a second or two to clear those out.
And it's regenerating right
Once they're clear,
now.
I'm going to add my 6 assets to the selection set, effectively replacing my selection set with those 6 assets.
So he went
And when I
from
do
490
that,
down
I
to
see
6
those
assets
6 assets represent
that were capacity issues. So he can focus on
And I have
generating
2 groups
a
of them.
project.
For the purposes of this presentation of logistic issues, I'm going to focus on these assets up here.
So he's
as
selecting
one
out of these 2 areas
So I'm going
to
to
select
use my
this as a
assets
project
option
for which is
in order
a
to just keep those assets
capacity
and
issue.
the other assets from my selection set. So
And
these
this
3
is
assets
utilizing
are what
the
I'm
software
going
to
create
make
my
your project,
out of.
so that you can
That I go
start
into
putting those
project
projects
module.
into your CIP budget.
And I add a project. And I'm going to call this project guide. Replacement.
And again, a lot of this data is collected from the guys working in the field, and it brings in conditions, situations, and that's how the data eventually got into the asset management software.
Now I can go ahead and add an estimated start and dates, other information here. But what I want to show you is how we create the job details. Creating a project in Viewworks is very similar to creating an engineer's cost estimate.
Now, when we
Tools
talked
utilize.
about
So when
with
I
the
add
sewer,
a job
different options were
represents
sewer
line item
replace,
that cost
sewer
estimate.
replace point
I'm
repair,
going to add a
and
job
seal.
specifically for the
Because
sewer
it's a capacity
asset
issue,
class. But I
the
could add jobs
job
in other
or
asset
the
classes
proper
of
repair
that
would
may be associated
would be
with
to replace it by
my asset
upsizing.
type here is sanitary pipe.
So
My job type is going to be
the job type,
comprehensive,
which they what
covers
they call
the
it,
extent of
then
the pipe,
will replace
and I'm going to
with the
replace
same
those
diameter,
pipes with
larger.
diameter.
This one it
I'm
says
going to use my
replace
field
with the
map
next larger
project
diameter PVC pipe. So it's able to generate or bring those
which
costs
represents the length of the
to
pipe
the,
to calculate my cost.
asset management software.
And what I'm going to do here is
It's actually going to get all the
pipes from my
measurements
selection
from the
set,
GIS
from current selection
for
set, the pipes in
the
this
measurements of all the pipes.
risk module.
So it'll start calculating
Okay.
your capital
Now what
improvement
that does
budget
is it goes out
directly from the map.
and it brings those pipes in, applies the values according to the length, calculates the cost, and estimates
And then
the
it has
cost
the
of
unit cost, and then
$12,000
the ultimate
replace
cost
those pipes
right over on the
with
end here.
20-inch pipes, as you can see.
Is that just a materials cost then, John? That comes
It
in?
is the cost installed.
Okay, so
I
there's
can go
labor
ahead and
that
save
goes
that
in.
project.
Right, so
And there's much
what he
more
can
that I
do
can
now
enter
is
too. For instance, I can start
he
to
can
track
bring in
my actual work on this project.
other costs,
Work orders, so I
which
have
would be
actual costs
replacement of the
associated with this
manual
project.
structures.
And those work
And that
orders
could be added to
portable
this. And
against
it's
that
basically
project. I can add
building up
overhead
a bid spec,
cost when
almost,
to the project as well.
when you
So,
do any project,
as a
what you have to do.
percentage of the-
And
of the
each
project
job
cost.
could be
I can
the
print
pavement,
this-
so you could
this
add the
project
pavement,
out,
and that would be measured from
including,
the
the
road length.
estimated cost.
You know, and if it's
current
decided that
active
only half the road's going to be
what I
paved,
can print
you can have it
and
calculate
generate that
50% of the road
for me,
length to
and then
generate that
presents
capital
that
improvement budget.
report that I can now share with others and distribute to others who are interested in this particular project.
And see, what he did was it automatically generates a PDF of the project area associated with all the costs associated with that project. Now he's able to share that with the finance so that they can ask more questions. This one here, they would try and utilize what other projects need to be done in that area. Does the road need to be reconstructed? Does the drainage need to be reconstructed?
And one of the, just to interject, as you can tell when you saw that example, there's a lot of setup that has to be done behind the scenes. But the payoff, that was a 6-minute video. And the 6 minutes that public works director or a GIS technician or whoever is walking through that analysis is able to draw all that data, put together something that he can hand out in a packet. It's got a lot more detail than what they would have received before. And you know, something like that would have taken days or a week to put together, you know, the old-fashioned way. So there is some upfront cost that can be tailored to your, you know, whatever the customer, the client's own costs and expenses are. But once it's set up, the power is you can lay the sewer analysis on, and then put the water analysis on top of that, and the failed roads on top of that. And you start layering on all of the community's assets. How they spend their money becomes less of an argument, because you're addressing the majority of the concerns with the limited resources. So that's the real power. And the point of that video was just to kind of show you how once the information's there, it's really pretty easy to go in there and pull it out.
So with that video, the failure mode was capacity. So what you need to understand, and it's important when you're doing a capital improvement budget, why you're doing that capital improvement budget. You know, is it because of deterioration, excessive use? Is it regulatory? You know, you're upgrading the wastewater treatment plant, and the failure is you're no longer meeting the new EPA regulatory requirements. Is there a capacity limitation? You know, some of the capacity issues are the storm drain systems, where Vermont came up with all new standards for their storm drains, going with much larger because of climate change. And there could be a change in use of upstream. There's more paved development that occurred, so now the water comes off quicker and is the drainage system downstream doesn't have capacity. So you look at that. Then inefficiencies. You know, with new technology, you know, there's so many new inefficiencies that are occurring. You know, equipment that is out there can be operated more efficient. You know, trash pickup can be done. Computers. I mean, if you have a 5-year-old computer, it becomes inefficient. You know, it becomes slower capacity. So these are different types of failures that occur, and it's important to know what the failure is so that you can address that and prioritize it. Okay? Really, one of the things that we're trying to push is when you're doing capital improvement and everything else, it's really an investment in the community. Every project you do is an investment because, you know, that's what the public want to hear, is that you're looking at their future, you're looking at their quality of life. But your budget is really to review your maintenance history and manage your risk, to minimize the risk. And a lot of times, the maintenance history, without an asset management program, without a good maintenance program, there isn't any, other than interviewing the staff on what has happened in the past. It's also critical, and we'll see with one department, they had set up a budget on the future slide here, but they can't budget enough to keep up with the normal deterioration of all their assets. So the only way they can do that is by having the departments work together and look at what their critical assets are. And it's important that the data is collected so that they can have good decisions based on the data that's collected. And you need to be able to communicate that to the public and get it out there. And leveraging your funding sources, depending on what type of failure, is critical to know what the funding source is out there for you. So really, the process continues with collecting technology. So a CIP budget each year, as something gets closer to construction time, more planning, more evaluation has to be done so that when it starts getting to the point that the public's voting on it, they have the right information to make the right decision. This is basically a sewer system, and this is the deterioration, the average deterioration. And basically we're looking at this section here of not doing anything, budgeting zero, and what would happen to the sewer system over this time period. And basically it goes from 50% deteriorated to only 40% left of its life. The average age of the sewer goes from 63 to 72. So it's getting older. It's the deterioration. I don't like the way that it calculates, but 40% indicates that there's 40% left going down the curve. Okay? Remaining, the average life used, 80% of your sewer system, the life has been used up. Then this line is that you are given a budget cap of $1 million. With that $1 million, it is assumed that it will maintain a CIP increase of 3% each year. So that number keeps on increasing 3%. In here, this is the budget required. And sometimes you'll see that the numbers are a little bit below what the budget cap is. That means that the next project that's lined up is greater and would go over the budget cap. So it's not put into the budget system. So the software is calculating what projects, based on risk and condition and the probability of failure. But at the same time, the life used, they start at 72. When they get out to 2023, they're falling behind. They're not catching up. The assets out there are deteriorating faster than they're making that investment. So it tells them that the $1 million isn't adequate to maintain their current condition. The useful life is useful. Typically, you may want to set a level, service level at 85%. You'd like to have your average life at 85% or 80%. It's like setting your pavement condition index that is around 85. You want to keep all your roads all around that condition. So that's how you can say, you know, what do I want to maintain for my level of service? What do I need for money? Based on that, you can develop a rate study of what you need for funding, utilizing these asset management Then you can, you prioritize, okay, there's different funding strategies that you're allowed to do. And you can look at just maintaining your assets. You had one of the slides. Okay, I'm fumbling on this. I'm going to skip it. I'm sorry. Okay. The different failures of your assets can depend on what different funding that you have available. If you have a funding requirement that's a permanent issue, you're going to get SRF. But if you have a capacity issue with your storm drain system and you've had failures and flooding, you may end up after a FEMA event to demonstrate all the different drain systems that need to be upgraded because of capacity issues. Even though they had not created damage, you may be able to get FEMA funding to upgrade to prevent future damage in the year. So FEMA is important. Projects, towns look at different bonding capabilities. But what's important is if the development or the assets failing and prevents economic development, you might be able to get economic development grants based on that failure rate that's preventing future growth and capacity. So knowing what the different failures are may help when money becomes available or grants become available. So it can be utilized as a tool. Also utilizing the same software tracking of different events. It allows reimbursement during a FEMA event to be much higher. So the reimbursement during the FEMA and the ability to prevent future FEMA flooding events is always an important aspect. Okay. Well, I'm going to pop up. Thing I'm talking about. Is I ran the same number for the sewer system, trying to figure out what they needed for a budget. This is why she doesn't like me winging these. What was it called?
Well, basically, just an iterative analysis, right?
Go ahead. Yes. Basically, what we did was we took that sewer system, gave them a budget of $3 million, and it took 75 years to meet their level of service goal. But they were able to meet it after 75 years. And at that point, they have reached their sustainability number. So a lot of times, communities, their goal is to maintain sustainability. What do I need to maintain my infrastructure, my roads, and everything else? And then that gives them a sustainability number. Then, if they're not able to afford it, then are they able to run analysis of maintaining critical assets, letting non-critical assets run to failure? But at the same time, you have to increase your maintenance costs, because as the ones that are running to failure, your maintenance budget will increase. By tracking that, when your maintenance cost reaches the level that it costs more than replacing, that's the point that you make the investment to replace the asset. So these are the type of analysis that you're able to utilize in the asset management program. And you communicate that through developing your level of services, pet failures, and it's really getting everybody on board that's out there working in the field, understanding that they're part of that decision process.
Well, and just before we go to questions, just to kind of wrap up the thought, priorities change over time as well. And that's something that you need to be aware of. And just a couple real world examples. 10 years ago in Goffstown, nobody touched the road plan. Year after year, it went to town meeting, it was supported, it was voted on. But over time, as the roads improved, wasn't as big a priority to the town. If you're watching the news today and you watch Derry and everything going on in Derry with their town budget, they're talking about closing fire stations. They're talking about reducing the police force. What you don't hear them talking about is cutting the road budget. Alan Cote has done an amazing job in Derry of tracking his asset management, his road network. He keeps it up to date. He delivers on what he says he's going to do. And it gives the council a sense that, you know what, we don't want to touch the roads. We know that that's not a place we can cut. So he's still got a pretty good road budget, even though they're talking about closing fire stations and cutting police. So it's that data and the use of it is what, you know, managers, public managers are going to rely on. So that's how this all ties together. The power of these kind of higher end asset management tools, it allows you to layer all of your assets on top of each other. So as priorities shift, the decision makers can shift with it. Maybe sewer becomes a higher priority, or maybe, and as John said, layering and leveraging the different funding sources. You've got a road you want to fix, well, the sewer under there has failed, sewer is probably an enterprise fund. The water line is under capacity, water is an enterprise fund. Maybe by combining all those three together, now you've got a project you can afford. And it gives the community the sense that you can do it.